When fear takes over. The digital clock on Diana Hayes's nightstand glowed 2:47 a.m. when she heard the sound that every mother dreads. It was not Oliver's usual hungry cry or his playful babbling that sometimes woke her at odd hours. This was different. This was a desperate, gasping sound that made her blood run cold. Diana threw off her covers and rushed to the nursery. Her 8-month-old son lay in his crib, his tiny chest heaving with effort, his face flushed an alarming shade of red. When she placed her hand on his forehead, the heat radiating from his skin felt like touching a stovetop. "No, no, no," Diana whispered, her hands shaking as she scooped Oliver into her arms. His usual bright eyes looked glazed and unfocused. He tried to cry but could only manage weak, rattling sounds that terrified her even more than screaming would have. She grabbed her phone and dialed her best friend Rebecca, who answered on the third ring with a groggy voice. "Diana? What's wrong?" "It's Oliver. He can't breathe right. His fever is so high. I need to get him to the hospital right now." Rebecca's voice became instantly alert. "I'm coming over. Don't drive yourself. Give me 5 minutes." But Diana was already moving. She wrapped Oliver in his blanket, grabbed the diaper bag that she always kept stocked by the door, and rushed down the stairs of her apartment building. Every second felt like an eternity. Oliver's breathing grew more labored with each passing moment. The desperate journey. Outside, the Chicago streets were eerily quiet. Diana managed to flag down a taxi within minutes, something she would later consider a miracle. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, took one look at the baby in her arms and stepped on the gas. "St. Mary's Hospital," Diana said, her voice breaking. "Please hurry." "Hold on, Mama. We'll get there," the driver assured her, weaving through the empty streets faster than the speed limit allowed. Diana held Oliver close, feeling his rapid heartbeat against her chest. She whispered to him constantly, trying to keep herself calm as much as him. "You're going to be okay, baby. Mama's here. We're almost there. Just hold on for me." Oliver's eyes fluttered, and for a terrifying moment, Diana thought he might lose consciousness. She pressed the call button for Rebecca again. "I'm in a taxi. We're almost at St. Mary's. Can you meet me there?" "Already on my way," Rebecca replied. "Stay strong, Diana. Oliver is a fighter." The 7-minute drive felt like 7 hours. When they finally pulled up to the emergency room entrance, Diana didn't even wait for her receipt. She thrust 2 $20 bills at the driver and ran through the automatic doors, clutching Oliver to her chest. The shock of recognition. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room felt harsh and cold. Diana rushed to the reception desk where a tired-looking nurse sat behind a computer screen. "My baby can't breathe properly," Diana said, her voice rising with panic. "He has a very high fever. Please, he needs help right now." The nurse looked up, assessed the situation with practiced efficiency, and immediately pressed a button. "We need a doctor in triage immediately." Within seconds, a door swung open and a tall figure in blue scrubs emerged, moving with purpose and authority. Diana looked up to explain the situation again, and the words died in her throat. Nathan Rivers stood before her, stethoscope around his neck, eyes widening in recognition that mirrored her own shock. For a frozen moment, they simply stared at each other, 2 years of separation collapsing into nothing. "Diana?" Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. But there was no time for reunion or explanation. Oliver let out another gasping cry, and Nathan's professional training kicked in immediately. He reached for the baby without hesitation. "How long has he been like this?" Nathan asked, his voice steady now, his hands gentle as he took Oliver from Diana's arms. "I don't know. Maybe 30 minutes since I found him. His fever is really high, and he sounds like he's struggling to breathe." Nathan was already moving, carrying Oliver toward the examination rooms. A nurse appeared beside him, and Diana followed closely, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The emergency examination. They entered a small examination room filled with medical equipment. Nathan placed Oliver on the padded table under bright lights. The baby looked so small and vulnerable there, his breathing still labored, his face still flushed with fever. "I need vitals now," Nathan said to the nurse, who immediately began attaching monitoring equipment to Oliver's tiny body. Nathan pulled out his stethoscope and listened to Oliver's chest, his face growing more serious with each passing second. Diana stood against the wall, hugging herself, watching this surreal scene unfold. The man she had loved, the man whose child she had raised alone for 8 months, was now trying to save their son. And he didn't even know. "Temperature is 104.2, the nurse reported. Respiratory rate is 52. Oxygen saturation is 88%. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Get me a pediatric oxygen mask. Start in 4 line. I want a chest X-ray stat and blood work for infection markers. Move fast." More nurses rushed in. The room became a controlled chaos of medical activity. Diana pressed herself further against the wall, feeling helpless and terrified, watching strangers poke her baby with needles and attach wires to his small body. Oliver cried weakly through it all, and every sound pierced Diana's heart like a knife. Nathan worked with focused intensity, his hands steady despite the situation. He inserted an 4 line into Oliver's small arm with practiced skill, then placed an oxygen mask over the baby's face. Within moments, the monitors showed Oliver's oxygen levels beginning to improve. "What's wrong with him?" Diana asked, her voice small and scared. Nathan looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw a storm of emotions in his eyes. Confusion, shock, concern, and something else she couldn't quite name. "His lungs are severely congested. I suspect pneumonia, but we need X-rays to confirm. Has he been sick recently? Any cold symptoms? He had a runny nose yesterday, but it seemed minor." "Nothing like this." Nathan nodded, processing the information. The nurse returned with a portable X-ray machine, and Nathan carefully positioned Oliver for the imaging. The terrible realization. As they waited for the X-ray results, the immediate crisis seemed to stabilize. Oliver's breathing, while still labored, was better with the oxygen support. His color was slowly returning to normal. But the tension in the room remained thick and heavy. Nathan pulled off his gloves and finally allowed himself to really look at the baby on the table. Diana watched as his eyes traveled over Oliver's features. The dark curly hair. The shape of his nose. The curve of his chin. She saw the exact moment when recognition dawned, when the pieces clicked into place. Nathan's face went pale. He looked at Diana, then back at Oliver, then at Diana again. His mouth opened but no words came out. "How old is he?" Nathan finally managed to ask, though his voice was barely audible. Diana swallowed hard. This was not how she had imagined this conversation going, if it ever happened at all. 8 months. She watched Nathan do the math in his head. Watched as his hand gripped the edge of the examination table. Watched as his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. "Is he?" Nathan started, then stopped. He took a deep breath and tried again. "Diana, is he mine?" The question hung in the air between them. The monitors continued their steady beeping. The oxygen machine hissed softly. And in that moment, Diana's carefully constructed world began to crumble. "Yes," she whispered. "Nathan, this is your son." The weight of truth. Nathan staggered backward, gripping the counter behind him for support. His face cycled through a dozen emotions in seconds: shock, disbelief, anger, confusion, and something that looked like grief. Diana watched him process the information, her own heart breaking at the pain in his eyes. "My son," Nathan repeated, the word sounding foreign in his mouth. I have a son. For 8 months, I've had a son, and I didn't know. Before Diana could respond, the nurse returned with the X-ray results on a tablet. Nathan forced himself back into doctor mode, though his hands trembled slightly as he studied the images. Diana could see him compartmentalizing, putting his personal shock aside to focus on the medical emergency in front of him. Bacterial pneumonia, Nathan confirmed, his voice tight. Severe, but we caught it in time. He needs to be admitted. For antibiotics, continued oxygen support, and close monitoring for at least 48 hours. The nurse nodded and left to arrange the admission. As soon as they were alone again, Nathan turned to Diana with eyes full of questions and hurt. How could you not tell me? His voice cracked. How could you keep something like this from me? Broken communication. Diana felt tears streaming down her face. I tried, Nathan. I tried so many times. Tried? What does that mean? You pick up a phone. You send a message. You find a way. I did. Diana's voice rose, then immediately dropped as she glanced at Oliver, not wanting to disturb him. I called you dozens of times. I sent emails. I sent messages through social media. Everything bounced back or went unanswered. Nathan shook his head, confused. That's impossible. I never changed my number. I never deleted my accounts. You left the country, Nathan. Remember? That emergency with your father? You said you'd be gone for 2 weeks, maybe a month. That was over 2 years ago. The color drained from Nathan's face as memory flooded back. My father's accident in London. The emergency surgery. The complications. Yes, Diana said softly. You called me from the airport. You said your father had been in a terrible car accident and needed immediate surgery. You said you'd call when you landed. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar to Diana. But I did call. I called from the hospital in London that same night. I never got that call. I tried multiple times over the next few days. Your number said it was disconnected. Diana's eyes widened. I lost my phone at the airport the day after you left. When I got a new one, I had to get a new number because the old one had been reassigned to someone else. I tried to contact you through email and social media. I never got anything, Nathan insisted. Wait. His face changed as something occurred to him. My phone was stolen in London during the first week. With everything happening with my father, I didn't replace it right away. When I finally did, I set up new accounts because I couldn't remember half my passwords. I was going to reach out to everyone once things settled down. They stared at each other, the terrible coincidence settling over them like a shroud. A stolen phone. A lost phone. Timing that couldn't have been worse, the missing months. By the time I realized I was pregnant, Diana continued, her voice hollow, it had been 6 weeks since I'd heard from you. I went to your apartment. It was empty. Your lease had ended. Your roommate told me you'd moved out in a hurry before leaving for London. He didn't have a forwarding address. Nathan closed his eyes, pain etched across his features. I sublet the place because I didn't know how long I'd be gone. The roommate wasn't supposed to move out until I got back. I went to the hospital where you did your residency. They said you'd requested an extended leave of absence for a family emergency. They couldn't give me any contact information due to privacy policies. I was in London for 18 months, Nathan said quietly. My father had 3 surgeries. Each one had complications. Then my mother fell apart from the stress, and I couldn't leave them. By the time I came back to Chicago, I assumed you'd moved on with your life. I thought maybe you'd met someone else and that's why you never responded to my attempts to reconnect. I thought you'd abandoned me, Diana whispered. When I found out I was pregnant and couldn't reach you, I thought you'd decided to cut ties. I thought maybe your family had convinced you I wasn't worth the trouble. Nathan looked stricken. My family loved you. My mother asked about you constantly. She was heartbroken when I told her we'd lost touch. A nurse poked her head in. Dr. Rivers, we have the room ready for the baby. Room 304 in pediatrics. Nathan nodded, then looked at Oliver, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep despite all the medical equipment attached to him. I'll handle the transfer personally. Unexpected arrival. As Nathan carefully prepared Oliver for transport to the pediatric ward, Diana heard a familiar voice in the hallway. Her stomach dropped. Excuse me, I'm looking for Dr. Nathan Rivers. I was told there was an emergency. Patricia Rivers swept into the room, elegant even at 3 in the morning, her silver hair perfectly styled, concern etched on her refined features. She stopped short when she saw Diana. Diana? Is that you? Patricia's face lit up with surprised joy. Then her eyes fell on the baby in Nathan's arms, and her expression shifted to confusion. What's going on? Nathan, you called and said there was a family emergency. Nathan and Diana exchanged glances. This was not the time or place for this conversation, but there seemed to be no avoiding it. Mom, Nathan said carefully, this is Oliver. He has pneumonia, and we're admitting him to pediatrics. Patricia stepped closer, studying the baby's sleeping face. Diana watched as the older woman's sharp eyes took in every detail. The resemblance between Nathan and Oliver was unmistakable once you knew to look for it. Nathan, Patricia said slowly, her voice taking on a strange quality. Why do you look at this child as if your heart is breaking? Because he's mine, Nathan replied, his voice raw. This is my son. Diana's and mine. Patricia's hand flew to her chest. For a moment, Diana thought the woman might faint. Instead, she sank into the nearest chair, her eyes never leaving Oliver's face. A grandson, Patricia breathed. I have a grandson. Then her eyes snapped to Diana, not with anger, but with desperate confusion. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you reach out? I tried, Diana said, fresh tears falling. Mrs. Rivers, I promise I tried. But everything went wrong. The timing, the lost phones, the miscommunication. By the time I realized what had happened, I thought your family had rejected me. I thought Nathan had chosen to walk away. Patricia stood and crossed the room, taking Diana's hands in hers. My dear girl, we would never have rejected you or this child. Never. The long night they moved Oliver to the pediatric ward as a strange, fractured family unit. Nathan pushed the hospital bed while Diana walked alongside, one hand constantly touching Oliver to reassure herself he was still breathing. Patricia followed behind, still processing the revelation. Room 304 was a private room with a small couch that converted to a bed, and a comfortable chair. The nurses helped transfer Oliver to the hospital crib, adjusting all the monitoring equipment and 4 lines. The antibiotics are already working, Nathan said, studying the monitors. His oxygen saturation is improving. Temperature is down to 102. He's going to be okay. Diana finally allowed herself to breathe fully. You're sure? I'm sure. Pneumonia in infants is serious, but we caught it early. He'll need to stay here for observation, but he's going to recover completely. Nathan pulled up Oliver's chart on the computer, and Diana saw him typing notes with shaking hands. She realized he was documenting his own son's medical history, adding pieces of information he should have known for 8 months but didn't. What's his full name? Nathan asked quietly. Oliver James Hayes. Nathan's fingers paused over the keyboard. Hayes. Not Rivers. I didn't think I had the right, Diana said softly. You weren't there. I didn't know if you'd want to be. I would have been there for everything if I'd known, Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. The pregnancy, the birth, every milestone. I missed all of it. Patricia spoke up from the corner where she'd been quietly watching. We can't change the past. But we can change what happens from here. Quiet revelations. As the night wore on into early morning, Nathan refused to leave. He pulled strings to get another doctor to cover his shift, claiming a family emergency, which was technically true. He sat in the chair beside Oliver's crib, watching his son sleep with an intensity that broke Diana's heart. Diana dozed fitfully on the convertible couch, exhausted from adrenaline crash and emotional overload. Patricia had gone home to get some rest but promised to return in the morning with food and anything else they might need. Around 6 in the morning, Diana woke to find Nathan sitting on the edge of the couch, his face haggard. "I keep thinking about everything I missed," he said without preamble. "Did you have morning sickness? Were you scared during the pregnancy? Who was with you when he was born? What was his first word? Does he like music? What makes him laugh?" Diana sat up, pulling the thin hospital blanket around her shoulders. "I had terrible morning sickness for 4 months. I was terrified during the entire pregnancy. My friend Rebecca was with me when he was born. He hasn't said his first word yet, but he babbles constantly. He loves music, especially piano. And he laughs when you make silly faces at him." Nathan absorbed every word like a man starving for information. "I want to know everything. Every detail, no matter how small." "You'll have time," Diana said gently. "He's your son. You'll have all the time in the world to know him." "Will I?" Nathan looked at her with raw vulnerability. "Or will you disappear again? Take him away because you don't trust me?" "I never disappeared. I've been here in Chicago the whole time. Same apartment, same job, same life." "I looked for you," Nathan admitted. "When I got back from London, I looked. But Hayes is your mother's maiden name, isn't it? I was searching for Diana Whitmore. I thought maybe you'd gotten married." Diana nodded. "I changed it legally after Oliver was born. A fresh start, or so I thought." They sat in silence for a moment, watching Oliver sleep peacefully, the monitors showing steady improvement in his condition. "I want to be his father," Nathan said firmly. "Not just a doctor who treats him or a stranger who shows up occasionally. I want to be there for school plays and skin knees and bedtime stories. I want to be his dad." "I want that too," Diana replied. "I never wanted to raise him alone. I just didn't think I had a choice." New morning, new chances. As sunlight began filtering through the hospital room window, Oliver stirred and opened his eyes. His color looked much better, and his breathing was noticeably easier. When he saw Diana, he reached for her with a small sound of recognition. Diana stood to pick him up, mindful of all the wires and tubes. "Hey, baby boy. Mama's here." Oliver nuzzled against her, then turned his head and looked directly at Nathan with curious eyes. Nathan stood slowly, as if approaching something precious and fragile. "Can I hold him?" Nathan asked hesitantly. Diana looked at her son, then at the man she'd once loved and maybe never stopped loving. "Oliver, this is Nathan. He's the doctor who made you feel better. And he's your daddy." She transferred Oliver into Nathan's arms, adjusting the oxygen line and fork carefully. Nathan held his son for the first time with knowledge of who he was, and Diana watched tears stream down his face. Oliver studied Nathan's face with that serious expression babies sometimes get, as if taking the measure of this new person. Then he reached up and grabbed Nathan's nose, making a delighted sound. Nathan laughed through his tears. "Hi, Oliver. Hi, son. I'm so sorry I wasn't there before. But I'm here now, and I'm never leaving again." Building trust. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur of hospital routines and emotional revelations. True to his word, Nathan barely left the hospital. He arranged his schedule to be present during every doctor's round, every medication administration, every feeding time. Diana watched him transform from shocked ex-boyfriend to dedicated father with a speed that was both reassuring and overwhelming. Rebecca visited on the second day, bringing Diana clean clothes and takeout food that actually had flavor, unlike the hospital cafeteria offerings. She pulled Diana aside while Nathan was giving Oliver a bottle. "So that's him," Rebecca said, watching Nathan through the doorway. "The mysterious father who didn't know he had a kid. That's him. He seems pretty devoted already." "He is," Diana admitted. "Almost too devoted. I don't know if it's guilt or genuine love or just the shock talking." Rebecca squeezed her hand. "Maybe it's all three. But Diana, look at his face when he looks at Oliver. That's not acting. That's real." Diana knew Rebecca was right. Nathan gazed at Oliver with wonder and tenderness that couldn't be faked. But she'd built walls around her heart over the past 2 years, and they wouldn't come down easily. Patricia's redemption. Patricia Rivers became a constant presence, arriving each morning with homemade meals and leaving each evening only after ensuring Diana and Oliver had everything they needed. The woman who Diana had once thought looked down on her now treated her like a cherished daughter. On the third day, while Nathan was consulting with Oliver's pediatric specialist, Patricia sat beside Diana in the hospital room, watching Oliver play with a soft toy on the bed. "I owe you an apology," Patricia said suddenly. Diana looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For not fighting harder to stay in touch with you after Nathan left. I should have gotten your new number from someone. I should have tracked you down. If I had, you wouldn't have gone through the pregnancy alone. You wouldn't have spent 8 months thinking we'd rejected you. Mrs. Rivers, that's not your fault. Call me Patricia, please. And it is partially my fault. I was so consumed with my husband's recovery that I didn't prioritize finding the girl my son loved. That was wrong." Diana felt tears prick her eyes. "You were dealing with your husband nearly dying. That's not exactly the time to worry about your son's girlfriend." Patricia took Diana's hand. "But I should have. Because you weren't just Nathan's girlfriend. You were family. And I failed you. You're here now," Diana said softly. "That's what matters." Patricia smiled, then reached into her purse and pulled out a photo album. "I brought this for you. Pictures of Nathan as a baby and child. I thought you might like to see the resemblance, and someday Oliver will want to know what his father looked like growing up." Diana opened the album and gasped. The resemblance between baby Nathan and baby Oliver was uncanny. Same dark curls, same serious expression, same dimple in the left cheek. "They're identical," Diana breathed. "They are. And that makes my heart so full I could burst." Patricia pointed to one photo. This was Nathan at 8 months, exactly Oliver's age. "Look at that expression. That's the same face Oliver makes when he's concentrating on something." They spent the next hour going through photos, Patricia sharing stories of Nathan's childhood. Diana found herself laughing at tales of his mischievous adventures and stubborn determination, seeing glimpses of traits that might appear in Oliver as he grew. The second scare. On the fourth morning, Diana woke early to find Oliver's breathing had become labored again. Panic seized her instantly. "Nathan," she called out, louder than she intended. Nathan, who had fallen asleep in the chair beside Oliver's crib, jerked awake immediately. His doctor instincts kicked in before he was fully conscious. He was at Oliver's side in seconds, checking vitals, listening to his chest. "His oxygen saturation is dropping," Nathan said, his voice tight with controlled concern. "Mrs. Rivers, I promise I tried. But everything went wrong. The timing, the lost phones, the miscommunication. By the time I realized what had happened, I thought your family had rejected me. I thought Nathan had chosen to walk away." Patricia stood and crossed the room, taking Diana's hands in hers. "My dear girl, we would never have rejected you or this child. Never." The long night they moved Oliver to the pediatric ward as a strange, fractured family unit. Nathan pushed the hospital bed while Diana walked alongside, one hand constantly touching Oliver to reassure herself he was still breathing. Patricia followed behind, still processing the revelation. Room 304 was a private room with a small couch that converted to a bed, and a comfortable chair. The nurses helped transfer Oliver to the hospital crib, adjusting all the monitoring equipment and 4 lines. "The antibiotics are already working," Nathan said, studying the monitors. "His oxygen saturation is improving. Temperature is down to 102. He's going to be okay." Diana finally allowed herself to breathe fully. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Pneumonia in infants is serious, but we caught it early. He'll need to stay here for observation, but he's going to recover completely." Nathan pulled up Oliver's chart on the computer, and Diana saw him typing notes with shaking hands. She realized he was documenting his own son's medical history, adding pieces of information he should have known for 8 months but didn't. "What's his full name?" Nathan asked quietly. "Oliver James Hayes." Nathan's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Hayes. Not Rivers." "I didn't think I had the right," Diana said softly. "You weren't there. I didn't know if you'd want to be." "I would have been there for everything if I'd known," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "The pregnancy, the birth, every milestone. I missed all of it." Patricia spoke up from the corner where she'd been quietly watching. "We can't change the past. But we can change what happens from here." Quiet revelations. As the night wore on into early morning, Nathan refused to leave. He pulled strings to get another doctor to cover his shift, claiming a family emergency, which was technically true. He sat in the chair beside Oliver's crib, watching his son sleep with an intensity that broke Diana's heart. Diana dozed fitfully on the convertible couch, exhausted from adrenaline crash and emotional overload. Patricia had gone home to get some rest but promised to return in the morning with food and anything else they might need. Around 6 in the morning, Diana woke to find Nathan sitting on the edge of the couch, his face haggard. "I keep thinking about everything I missed," he said without preamble. "Did you have morning sickness? Were you scared during the pregnancy? Who was with you when he was born? What was his first word? Does he like music? What makes him laugh?" Diana sat up, pulling the thin hospital blanket around her shoulders. "I had terrible morning sickness for 4 months. I was terrified during the entire pregnancy. My friend Rebecca was with me when he was born. He hasn't said his first word yet, but he babbles constantly. He loves music, especially piano. And he laughs when you make silly faces at him." Nathan absorbed every word like a man starving for information. "I want to know everything. Every detail, no matter how small." "You'll have time," Diana said gently. "He's your son. You'll have all the time in the world to know him." "Will I?" Nathan looked at her with raw vulnerability. "Or will you disappear again? Take him away because you don't trust me?" "I never disappeared. I've been here in Chicago the whole time. Same apartment, same job, same life." "I looked for you," Nathan admitted. "When I got back from London, I need to increase the oxygen flow." He pressed the call button for the nurse while adjusting Oliver's oxygen mask. Diana stood frozen, terror washing over her. They'd been making such good progress. Oliver was supposed to be getting better, not worse. The pediatric specialist, Dr. Jennings, arrived within minutes. She examined Oliver thoroughly while Diana stood to the side, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Secondary infection," Dr. Jennings announced. "Not uncommon with bacterial pneumonia, but we need to adjust his antibiotics. Nathan, I want to add another 4 medication to his regimen." Nathan nodded, his jaw clenched. Diana saw the fear in his eyes despite his professional demeanor, and it terrified her even more. If Nathan was scared, things must be serious. For the next several hours, they lived in suspended anxiety. Oliver received the new medication. His oxygen was increased. Monitors beeped constantly. Nurses came and went with practiced efficiency. Nathan never left Oliver's side, one hand constantly on his son, as if his touch alone could will the baby to heal. Diana paced the small room, unable to sit still, unable to think about anything except losing her child. Patricia arrived and held Diana while she cried, offering the maternal comfort Diana desperately needed. Breaking through fear. It was during those terrifying hours that something shifted between Diana and Nathan. The walls Diana had built began to crack as she watched Nathan fight for their son with everything he had. This wasn't just a man playing at fatherhood. This was a father who would move heaven and earth to save his child. Around noon, Oliver's condition finally stabilized. The new medication was working. His breathing eased. His color improved. The crisis had passed. Nathan slumped in his chair, exhausted and emotionally drained. Diana sat on the arm of the chair and put her hand on his shoulder. Without thinking, Nathan reached up and covered her hand with his. "I can't do this," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "I can't watch him suffer and feel this helpless. How have you done this alone for 8 months? Every fever, every cold, every moment of worry, you faced it all by yourself." "Because I had to," Diana replied simply. "Because he needed me to be strong. You're the strongest person I know." Nathan looked up at her, and Diana saw not just admiration in his eyes but something deeper. "I fell in love with you 3 years ago because you were brilliant and funny and saw the world differently than anyone I'd ever met. But now, seeing you as a mother, seeing how you've raised our son alone with such love and dedication, I'm in awe of you." Diana's breath caught. They hadn't talked about their feelings for each other, too focused on Oliver and the practical matters of co-parenting. But now, in this moment of shared fear and relief, the truth couldn't be avoided. "Nathan," she started, but he shook his head. "Let me finish. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. I missed everything. I wasn't there when you needed me most, even though it wasn't my fault, even though it was a terrible series of misunderstandings. But Diana, I want another chance. Not just as Oliver's father, but as your partner. I want us to be a family, a real family." The choice. Diana stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Chicago skyline. She'd spent 2 years building a life as a single mother. She'd learned to be independent, to make all the decisions, to rely only on herself. Letting Nathan in meant giving up some of that control, trusting him not to disappear again. But it also meant Oliver would have a father. It meant not facing every challenge alone. It meant maybe, just maybe, getting back the love she'd lost. "I'm scared," Diana admitted without turning around. "I'm scared of trusting you and getting hurt again. I'm scared of Oliver getting attached and then you deciding this is too hard. I'm scared of feeling what I used to feel for you because it nearly destroyed me when you left." She heard Nathan stand and felt him approach behind her, though he didn't touch her. "I'm scared too," Nathan said. "I'm scared I won't be a good enough father. I'm scared I've already missed too much. I'm scared you'll never fully forgive me for not being there, even though neither of us could control what happened. But I'm more scared of not trying. I'm more scared of looking back in 10 years and regretting that I didn't fight for this, for us, for our family." Diana turned to face him. "What are you asking for exactly?" "Time," Nathan said simply. "I'm asking for time to prove myself. I'm not asking you to move in with me tomorrow or marry me next week. I'm asking you to let me be present in Oliver's life every single day. Let me share the responsibilities and the joys. Let me take him to doctor's appointments and teach him to walk and read him bedtime stories. And while I'm doing all that, maybe you'll see that I'm serious. Maybe you'll learn to trust me again. And maybe, eventually, we can figure out what we are to each other." It was the most reasonable, most respectful thing he could have said. Diana felt her walls crumbling a little more. "Okay," she said softly. We'll try. But Nathan, if you ever disappear again, if you ever make me or Oliver feel abandoned, there won't be a third chance. There won't need to be, Nathan promised. I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Coming home. Oliver was discharged 2 days later with a clean bill of health. The pneumonia had cleared completely, and he was back to his cheerful, energetic self. Nathan had taken a week off work to help Diana and Oliver settle back into their routine. When they arrived at Diana's modest apartment, Nathan looked around at the space where his son had spent his entire life without him. He saw the crib Diana had assembled herself, the hand-me-down furniture, the photos on the walls chronicling Oliver's growth month by month. I missed all of this, Nathan said, picking up a photo of a newborn Oliver. I missed seeing him this small. You can't get that time back, Diana said gently. But you can be here for everything going forward. Over the next few days, they established a routine. Nathan came over every morning before work to help with Oliver's breakfast. He returned every evening to help with dinner and bedtime. He changed diapers, gave baths, and walked the floor with a fussy baby at 2 in the morning. He learned Oliver's preferences, his quirks, his schedule. Diana watched him fall more in love with their son each day. She also felt herself falling for Nathan all over again, though she tried to guard her heart. This new Nathan was more mature than the boy she'd known in college. He was patient, responsible, and completely devoted. The proposal. 3 months after that terrifying night in the emergency room, Nathan showed up at Diana's apartment on a Saturday morning with an unusual request. Pack a bag for you and Oliver. We're going somewhere for the weekend. Diana raised an eyebrow. Oh really? Where? It's a surprise. Trust me. That word, trust, still didn't come easily. But Diana had watched Nathan show up every single day for 3 months. He'd proven his commitment over and over. So she packed a bag. Nathan drove them 2 hours north to a beautiful lake house. Diana recognized it immediately as the place Nathan's family owned, where they'd spent a memorable weekend during their college relationship. Your parents are here? Diana asked, suddenly nervous. Just my mom. My dad is visiting my sister. Mom wanted to spend time with Oliver, and I wanted to spend time with you. Really spend time, without the pressure of daily routines and responsibilities. The weekend was magical. Patricia doted on Oliver, taking him for walks and playing with him for hours, giving Diana and Nathan time alone together. They took a boat out on the lake and talked about everything, their past, their present, their hopes for the future. They laughed together for the first time in years. They held hands. They kissed under the stars. On Sunday morning, Nathan suggested a walk down to the dock while Patricia watched Oliver. Diana agreed, feeling peaceful in a way she hadn't in years. When they reached the end of the dock, Nathan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Diana Hayes, these last 3 months have been the hardest and best of my life. Hard because every day I'm reminded of what I missed. Best because I get to watch you be an amazing mother to our son. Because I get to be Oliver's father. Because I get to fall in love with you all over again. Diana's heart started pounding as Nathan dropped to one knee. I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. But I also know I want to spend the rest of my life with you and Oliver. I want more children with you someday. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to be a family, officially and completely. He pulled out a ring box and opened it, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. Will you marry me? Diana looked down at this man who had been her first love, the father of her child, her second chance at happiness. She thought about all they'd lost and all they'd gained. She thought about trust and forgiveness and the courage it takes to try again. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'll marry you. Nathan stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her deeply while the morning sun sparkled on the lake around them. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. Full circle. 6 months later, Diana stood in front of a mirror in a simple white dress, her hair adorned with flowers. Rebecca fussed with the hem while Patricia held Oliver, who looked adorable in a tiny suit. "Nervous?" Rebecca asked. "No," Diana replied, and she meant it. The past 9 months had proven Nathan's commitment beyond any doubt. He'd moved into her apartment, shared every responsibility, and shown up for their family every single day. They'd built something new and strong from the ruins of their past. The ceremony was small and intimate, held in the same hospital chapel where Oliver had recovered from pneumonia. It seemed fitting to start their official life together in the place where they'd been reunited. Nathan waited at the altar, and when Diana walked down the aisle carrying Oliver, his face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. This wasn't just a man marrying his girlfriend. This was a father watching his family come together. This was a second chance being honored and celebrated. After they exchanged vows and rings, the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Nathan kissed Diana, then took Oliver from her arms and kissed his forehead. "We're a family now," Nathan whispered to Oliver. "Officially and forever." Oliver responded by grabbing his father's nose and giggling, making everyone laugh. At the small reception afterward, Patricia gave a toast. To second chances, to love that survives misunderstanding and separation, and to a grandson who brought his parents back together. May your family always be blessed. As Diana danced with Nathan later, Oliver asleep in Patricia's arms nearby, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The fear, the pain, the misunderstandings, and ultimately the forgiveness and healing. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, holding her close. "I'm thinking about that night I rushed into the emergency room, terrified for Oliver's life. I never imagined that night would lead to this, to us being together again, to having a real family. Everything happens for a reason," Nathan said. "Maybe we needed to go through all that to appreciate what we have now. Maybe we needed to grow up separately to come back together as better people." "Maybe," Diana agreed. "Or maybe we just got really lucky." "I prefer to think we were meant to be," Nathan replied, spinning her gently. "You, me, and Oliver. This was always how our story was supposed to go." Diana rested her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling completely content for the first time in years. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had led them home. Home to each other, home to their family, home to a love that had survived everything life threw at it. And as she looked at Oliver sleeping peacefully in his grandmother's arms, Diana knew that every struggle had been worth it. Out of pain and misunderstanding had come something beautiful, something permanent, something real. Their family was complete at last.